Well, welcome everyone. I am super excited. I'm Heather Cole with Lodestar Solutions, if you don't know me. And I'm excited because I had this idea that my CFO friends need to know more about technology. Yes, I'm calling you guys out. We need to help you level up your knowledge and skills, and most importantly, learn to ask the right questions. So I brought a couple friends because you guys know me. I don't know everything, but I have a lot of smart friends. So today with me are some friends that are security experts. So we're going to just have a little chat amongst friends about what CFOs need to know about security and what questions you guys should be asking internally of your IT teams to make sure you do not have unforeseeable risk. So Raj, I'm going to start with you. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Great. Thanks, Heather. And thanks for setting this up. I'm president and CEO of Adaptive Systems. We're a firm that's exclusively focused on data security, data privacy, and compliance. Data is exploding in the enterprise, and organizations want to control their data. And we help secure all paths to data, whether it's on-prem, in the cloud, hybrid cloud. And we try to help them answer questions like how my data is being accessed, where the data is accessed, who is accessing it, when, and sometimes why. So that's what we do, and that's what we do is we help organizations to get control of their data and have a more of a risk-based approach than just a compliance-based approach, which is a more holistic approach to understanding what's going on with your data and how to protect it.
I think that's great. And I think that a lot of companies are finally having that epiphany moment that they realize that data might be their biggest asset. Would you guys agree? Like for years, we kept telling them this, and now they're like, oh, wait, our data is actually our gold, right? So that's So Rachel,
call that their crown jewels, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rachel, it's all about you.
Okay, awesome. Well, everybody, hi, thank you. And Heather, again, just like Raj said, thanks for scheduling this. And I'm glad to be on this little fireside chat together. So this is exciting to talk about security. So just a little background on who we are. So I'm Reshma Murthy, President and CEO of Frontier Technology. So I'm a second generation family business owner. So my mom started it 30 years ago, and then I took over. So I get the awesome opportunity to work with my parents. And if you hear people talking in the background today, you have my father's down the hall, and I have my dog here. So if you hear weird sounds, sorry about that. So just want to clear the air. But anyway, so Frontier Technologies, we're located in Wilmington, Delaware, and we're an IT infrastructure services company, and we focus a lot around security solutions. When I say security, we're focusing on your auditing, your secure penetration testing, your security awareness training, your phishing testing, your risk assessment. So we come in and we help organizations pretty much protect their external, their perimeters from the inside out or outside in. So we offer those auditing services, and then we also come in and help remediate that for them too on different levels. And then also we help in security. So Raj just focuses on data security, but where we also focus on is your network security and your endpoint security and your end user security and the whole gamut of that portfolio, along with what Raj would do. From a data security perspective, we've worked with Raj in the past, and we bring him in on different opportunities. So again, I'm excited to talk a little bit more about our partnership and other security solutions today.
So you threw out a lot of terms there, and I just want to translate that for some of our CFOs that may not be so tech savvy, but many of you have experienced that horrible situation where someone sends your administrator or someone in accounting an email from an email address that looks very similar to yours. Yes. But maybe an L will be an I, and they send an email saying, you need to wire money to so-and-so right away, right? We call that phishing, guys, and they're literally going out there and trying to get someone that doesn't realize is trying to help him be, a great employee, and they get him caught in the net, so to speak, and they wire money to somebody, and suddenly it's in like Nigeria or somewhere, right? So this is stuff as a CFO you've probably actually experienced this, but didn't realize that there's people that actually specialize in this stuff, right? So those are absolutely real, security issues. And I think that it'd be really interesting to try and monetize some of this. Like, guys, when your data gets out there, I mean, we've all seen these data breaches where now they have to pay for, like Home Depot got breached a number of years ago, right? And now they have to pay tons of money and make sure that people are secure. So, one, bad press, right? Nobody needs that. But then just the whole stress. Imagine having to take all the time to go fix the situation and do damage control with your clients. So I think that this is an area that just we're starting to see it, but it's got to be amplified. Would you guys agree? And what are maybe a couple things, Raj, we'll start with you, with data security that people could, where should they start? Like, what questions should they ask?
Yeah, so they should obviously the awareness for data security is growing because of the proliferation of all these data privacy regulations now, like GDPR and CCPA. There's a New York State data privacy regulation. There's an Illinois one. There's a Brazilian one. Because the U.S. federal government doesn't have one, all the states are coming out with their own. But eventually, I think the federal government is going to get their act together. As a CFO, you have to start wondering, how do I protect myself, my organization, from these data privacy regulations? And the fines are kind of crazy, right? If you've seen the GDPR fines, they're in the millions. CCPA started being enforced last January, but because of COVID, they pushed it back to July. And so now you're starting to see, unfortunately, we're a litigious society. And so, all the lawyers are looking at these regulations and see where they can monetize.
Hey, the company excluded. You bring up a really great point, though, because I want to highlight something. When we all had to start working from home, that made companies even more exposed, did it not? Like,
yeah.
People are sitting there working and their data is on some guy's home network.
Right. Well, yes. Many companies were not ready to have their entire workforce working remote. They were not prepared with the bandwidth that they needed for their VPN and the technology that they needed to collaborate and communicate while they were not in the office. So COVID certainly has accelerated the digitization of the workforce and the enterprise. And so that's I think a good news, actually, because we need to do more of that. One of the things that I think CFOs need to ask themselves is, how am I exposed to these regulations? Obviously we're talking about data. So where is my sensitive data? Who has access to it? Are we encrypting that data? Do we have the proper controls, such as access control? Are we reviewing on a timely basis who has access to our databases and our file shares? Are we patching up the vulnerabilities that we have? And are we encrypting the data? Are we monitoring our data? So these are all controls that we need to put on. They should be thinking about putting on their data to help mitigate these risks due to the regulations that are coming up.
Excellent. Now, Rishma, I'd like to bounce over to you because you have, you mentioned that you do like infrastructure and network and stuff. And you and I have had conversations before about like weird systems that can be like the doorway in.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear about what your thoughts are, because when we think of security, we immediately think like secure the database or secure the Wi-Fi, but there's other systems with this whole Internet of Things going on that we need to know. And for those of you that still kind of challenged with what is Internet Things, it's basically when your refrigerator or your washing machine or your Ring doorbell is all connected to the internet, right? There's people that are collecting data about everything. So maybe you can share some war stories or some words of wisdom for our CFOs.
Definitely. And earlier you mentioned Home Depot and how that access, how they hacked into there. And then Target is another example, right? And then even you can talk a little bit more about SolarWinds and the breach there. And that's a little bit more on supply chain and how that breach happened. But when we're looking at Home Depot and Target, for instance, how did the hackers get in there? And I think and it's good for business owners, and being a business owner myself, you have to be able to control all of your external systems, and buildings. So if you have multiple offices, for example, who's managing those? Who are your exact suppliers? Who are supplying and supporting your HVAC systems and your cameras and your phones, right? For example, and elevators, right? Anything like that. All those, like Heather said, have an IP address. They're all being managed and controlled somewhere in a central location. But who's watching that? Is it facilities? Is it IT? Is it, depending on how big your organization, is it procurement, right? And so who's watching that? So what we come in and do is help identify these access points for our clients and help them say, okay, here are your external threats. These vendors who are coming in and supporting you from your outside of your network how are you protecting that first layer of defense? And that's the initial conversation that's really important for our clients to understand, and for business owners, right? And how are you protecting that data? Because they have an IP address, they're in there. As Heather said, all that data is going somewhere. Where is that data going? So it's first, we want to always help create a cybersecurity hygiene, help harden your external standards so that these external suppliers, your HVAC suppliers or whoever, has to adhere to these rules before they work for you. And then that's how we help initially. And then clearly the conversation goes on from there. But that's the first step that I would always suggest. So you avoid Target or a Home Depot example.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And you caused me to take notes, which is always a good thing.
Yes.
And it made me realize, Raj mentioned lawyers before and they're opportunists, but I think the lawyer me comes out when you start talking about this. Like I had these visions of those movies where AI goes rogue and they're like shutting down systems and I gotta warn people, we're not that far off of that actually being able to happen, right?
Oh, that's happening today. That's happening today.
Yeah, exactly. So
Right.
I also look at it from the perspective is something I'm always shocked. And I'm going to be really firm with you CFOs out there. When we sign contracts as consultants, because we're all consultants, we have teams that come in and work with you guys. And I am shocked how many times when we sign contracts, the client never requires cyber insurance. Guys, this is something you should have every consulting firm carry, right? Because if I, as your consultant, was actually remoting into your system and somebody hacked me and they tunneled their way into your systems, you need to make sure your consultants are covered for that. Those of you using one-man shops that are like the guy, right, or the gal, you're kind of exposing yourself. So you want to make sure your cyber insurance is going to cover them, or work with firms like us that carry proper insurance levels. And that's always a risk factor I see. And procurement departments don't require this. I have seen one in the last 10 years that actually asked us for our certificates for cyber insurance, which shocked me.
Yeah.
And that awareness is growing as well. And some organizations feel security is always done in layers, and the first layer is insurance. So let's have that insurance policies to cover ourselves, and then you add on other layers, like what Reshma talked about, penetration testing and your network, securing your network applications and data.
So what do you guys say to the people that say, well, that's never going to happen to me?
Mm.
Like, I'll be admit, I might have that stance sometimes. Like, well, that happens to the big companies, or that happens to, can this happen to anybody?
Yeah.
Yes, it can. It can happen to anyone. And there's only two kinds of organizations out there: ones that have not been hacked, and ones that will be hacked.
Yep.
Yes, cybersecurity is what should I say? It is a risk-based approach. You should have a risk-based approach and mitigate your risk that way. Everyone's going to be hacked. You just have to be mindful of what your risk tolerance is, and based on that, deploy the proper controls that you would need.
So what questions should a CFO be asking maybe their CIO? Like, where do they start? Because, that can sometimes be an awkward conversation if they haven't been involved in this before, right? For the CFO to walk down to the CIO's office and go, hey, what are we doing for cyber security, right? Like, that kind of gets awkward. How have you seen clients, or what do you recommend to clients to start this internal dialogue to just dot the I's and cross the T's?
Sure. Well, and Raj, I'm just going to start speaking, but what I always suggest is following the NIST standards, right? You have to be able, everything we kind of just said, identify the data that's important, identify the risks, identify your entire environment, identify your computers, your systems, the outside in, inside out, right? So you kind of get a layout, topography, right, of your entire system. And then you have to be able to follow it from detecting and responding and creating a remediation plan by following those basic 5 pillars of NIST. And I think if you can follow that, that will help give you a base, a guideline of where you are and how you need to respond, recover, and detect, respond, recover, and then get back to your normal business. I also would suggest doing the different, again, depending on budgets, you could be a 5 or 10 person organization, right? And you still need to get your external and internal penetration tests. I suggest you get those yearly. Every 3 years, switch different cybersecurity providers so you can make sure that your current provider is really watching and monitoring those things. Also do a risk assessment, go through that program, which is part of your NIST standards as well, and go throughout so you understand from beginning to end. And a lot of these are not necessarily very expensive processes. It just takes time. You need to have the right people involved, the key decision makers, your IT folks, especially for your risk assessment procedure, so you can actually put it together. But in general, it's not too costly. It's just taking the time to really identify, and like you said, say, it is going to happen to me, so what am I going to do? Versus just like turning, a blind eye.
Yeah.
So you bring up a good point. Oh, I'm sorry, Raj. Do you want to add on to that?
Just wanted to add that those are all very, very valid points. And once you have that risk assessment, you should develop a roadmap as to where your gaps are and how are you going to address these gaps.
Correct.
So having a roadmap in these, this is not an easy fix. It's not something that you'll do in over a month or 6 months. Right. It'll be years. So you need to establish a proper roadmap and to understand where your gaps are and to start addressing them.
Correct. So you guys, what I'm hearing you say, I'm going to reiterate some of this, is they obviously have to first assess the risk and then create the roadmaps, which is fabulous. If they're looking for, and they should use outside help for this, I'm assuming. This is not something that you want to to just keep internal resources. I'm assuming that this is best done, just like an auditor, right? Using some outside people to help you with this. What would be a couple things that they should be looking for when they're looking for firms to help them with this process? Because, imagine we have some humongous firms, multi-billion-dollar companies, and then we have, some people that may be watching that are smaller boutique firms. So what questions should they ask of their potential provider to help them with the risk assessment and the roadmap?
Certainly their prior experience, their current clients, their some use cases and references that they can provide on what they're doing today and what they see down the road as other potential risks that they may not be thinking about.
Great.
So yeah, certainly all these questions are they need to know what the firm is doing today and have the references and be comfortable that I'm a small boutique shop, maybe I don't need a Deloitte, but there are plenty of small the risk and governance consulting firms that just focus on boutique firms, and that's probably what you'd be comfortable with if you're that size.
Mm-hmm. I'd also just suggest that you should also ask your service provider, your IT service provider, for sample reports, right? So if you're trying to talk to people, get the sample reports of their external pen tests or internal pen tests and view those results, because that will also be a good key identifier if they're looking at the right things, right? They can hide all the customer information, but the basics are the basics. And that's another good reference to look for as well.
I think I'd like to add one more thing to that. And I think this is always true of any consultant that you work with, is making sure that you feel like you can have those candid conversations, that they're truly going to tell you where your risk is and not be one of those that just tells you what you want to hear. Right. I think that if anything, this is more important. There are consulting firms that just want to keep billing you and tell you, oh, it's all good. And I think it's to have the candid relationship and be like, hey, because all this is changing too, right? I mean, new threats are coming in, things we didn't even see as a threat maybe a year or 2 years ago are now like, whoa. Like I had one client that wouldn't let their people, they had to all use Zoom backgrounds because they didn't want whiteboards or something in the background, right? Like the world is changing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
I forgot. Yeah, you're right. That's another threat too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess this has been fabulous, guys. I think what we've done here is we've started the I think I should have a conversation in people's heads. At least that was our goal, right? We will make sure that the end of this video has all of our contact information. But in closing, any final wrap-up points that you think CFOs should know about security challenges and risk factors? Raj, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So I would say in order to properly control your data, you must have a risk-based approach, which is a holistic approach that looks at data from a 360-degree view. And one of the first things that we do to help clients is to try to help them with where their sensitive data is, so they can apply the proper controls more precisely. You don't want to encrypt everything, but maybe just your sensitive objects and your sensitive where your sensitive data is. And you don't want to monitor everything. You want to monitor only certain sensitive privileged users and privileged data. So these kinds of exercises will help you to better understand the who, the what, when, where, and how of your data. And so, and that's what we do. That's all that we do. And I think we're very good at it.
Excellent. Great.
I have lots of places to start. I think it's just important just to understand the basics of the NIST framework. I think that's an easy understanding, study, knowledge base. You can just Google and get that 5 pillars. And that's a good place just to level set your own knowledge. And then I think it's just important, like Roger's saying, how to protect your data. You have to just think about all the other areas where you could be hacked, I think is important. And then also just to think through what's important to you. So if you lost this, like when you think about your disaster recovery plan, right, you have to think about the data that's most important so you can continue working. The same thing is if somebody comes in and steals your data and puts it for ransom, right, and then you have to do ransomware and all of that, what are your risks and what are you willing to lose and what are you not willing to lose? And again, that could be a small organization versus a big, it doesn't matter. I mean, I run a small team at Frontier, and although we work with clients from all sizes to enter to Fortune 100s, I always have to sit there and go through like what are our applications, and I do a health check every 3 months. I do the vulnerability test, and I just do those things even on our company just to make sure. So I'm just giving feedback on what I do as a business owner just to be safe and secure, and I can help with Heather and Raj and have more conversations around this. So.
Yeah, and that we were a number of years ago. We got our demo server got hacked for ransomware, and it was not a pretty experience.
Oh,
It was just our demo, so it didn't have anything on it, so we really didn't care.
Yeah.
But just, I guess the violation, oh my God, they got me. Like
Right.
I guess we got lazy with that machine. Like I said, you just kind of like, oh, we need it, let's put it up, and then you forget to apply all the security protocols and all the dot the i's and cross the t's. So, well, this has been fabulous. You guys are awesome. And if anyone wants to continue these conversations, like I said, we're going to put at the end of this everyone's contact information. The three of us, as you guys could tell, we're friends and we work together. And so, if you come to one of us and someone else is a better fit, we're going to tell you. But we just want you guys to start the conversation. And here's the thing. There are no stupid questions. No. So feel free to email us. This stuff is constantly changing. Technology providers always throw out acronyms. And sometimes you're like, what's that? That's what we're here to help you guys. We're trying to make it simple and easy for you to learn more about tech.